And here we are. Allahu Ahmed. Say hello, everyone.
It's Mohammed Al Snackbar.
The whitest.
He's Adam converted.
Long time ago.
We tried to convince him, no, but
yeah, we couldn't stop him.
You can't stop the will of Allah.
Yeah. Allah he took Allah into his heart.
Yes.
And was baptized.
Do the Muslims do that? Do they have that?
I don't think so.
For the baptizing.
That's uniquely.
Bit of Duncan.
In the meantime, this is a nuke. If you ever see one of these, run. See, it says nuke on it.
You ever see one of those stop, drop, and roll, right?
You duck under your desk, you cover your head.
And then you stop, drop, and roll.
And then you stop, drop, and roll.
Yeah. And then you'll be fine.
And then you get an ab workout while you're protected from the nukes.
Protected from the Russian nukes, of course. I just realized I think different websites do it, like the BBC, like mainstream media websites, BBC, Guardian stuff, along on their news section will have, categories, of news,
Mm-hmm.
and they break it up geographically usually, But when there's wars going on, they'll have
a theme.
When the war's going on, they'll have the name of the war as part of I suppose one of the categories, So they'll have Israel-Gaza war, then war in Ukraine, and then the rest are just the geographic regions, But I wonder how long it'll take before it's like Israel-Gaza war, war in Ukraine, US-Canada war, UK-France war, Australia-New Zealand war, Europe-Russia war, Latin America war. It'll just be all across the top. It'll just take your pick of which war you want to check in on today,
The Venezuela war. Yeah. Well, that's covered by Latin America.
Yeah, Venezuela-America war.
The China-Taiwan.
But that's not going to happen because Trump is a peacemaker.
I just saw that before coming in.
You just saw that he was a peacemaker before you came in? Breaking news.
No.
Where have you been, Neil?
He's on like number 10 now.
No, the breaking news is that Art of a Deal. That's what you're reading it from the Beeb, aren't you? I saw it on BBC as well.
Reading what?
That Trump is
a peacemaker?
No, a deal maker. That
a deal maker.
He's got a visit with Xi lined up, and ahead of that, they're going to do an awesome trade deal. US and China agree framework of trade deal ahead of Trump-Xi meeting. First of all, it's news that they're meeting. And secondly, there you go. That's Trump's... It's not the end. You know what it's been like all year. Yeah, next week it'll be something else.
This is Groundhog Day.
This is this week's...
I've been here before. Have you not been here before? I think I've been here before.
I feel like we've done this before.
Great trade deal with China. I think I've seen that before. Multiple times.
This week.
In between, interspersed by Trump imposes sanctions on China. Seen that multiple times as well. While doing trade deals. Trump does first ever sanctions plus trade deal with China. We sanction you and do a great deal at the same time. And everybody happy.
China say, nice doing business with you. Presumably, I mean, we don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I can't take any of this seriously anymore. I mean, this is about, like you say, it's the 5th time this year that kind of headline has appeared. Is he serious? Is someone else being serious on his behalf? Is it fake news about what Trump said? The next headline could be in a few hours. Trump blasts on Truth Social. That's fake news. I never said that. I mean, we really are in... They joked, like, with the first Trump administration. They were serious, but they were wrong as well, that we're moving into a post-truth world where you could no longer tell what's fake and what's real. We have some idea that was deliberately done because they wanted to muddy the waters, because people were obviously voting the wrong way with Brexit and Trump and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But it is now to an extreme. It's just you really get everything and nothing. And from one week to the next, it's you get the opposite of what was last week's news. And sometimes it is organically coming from the person in question, from Trump's mouth. He can change from hour to hour, but sometimes also things are put in his mouth that are never said.
Yeah. Most of the time, it's stuff that does actually come out of his mouth, though. In fact, it would be hard to, like, I don't think people need to put things in his mouth these days because so much shit comes out of it. Like, that it's just like, why would you bother trying to how dare you put words in my mouth? Well, Mr. President, that wasn't me put words in your mouth. Those are the words that actually came out of your mouth. In fact, those were just a few of the words that came out of your mouth. There's lots of others I didn't even record because why would you?
There is real news, though. Real things are happening, though. It's not all subjective nonsense. Vice President Vance went to Israel 3 days ago.
We'll just talk about the trade deal, though, since you touched on it. What's this?
Yeah, is it worth talking about? I don't know. Okay, let's do it.
Well, do you know anything about it? Like,
well, I know that next week it could be like old news, like never happened, or
framework of some kind of deal. Yeah. Well, the reason it just jumps around is because this past week, China just imposed, not out of context, but obviously in the context of the whole back and forth between China and the US and Trump, obviously, they imposed restrictions or controls over on rare earth minerals, the processing of rare earth minerals. Of course, that was a kind of like Trump. That's the thing Trump was very unhappy about, and then responded with, what did he say, 100% tariffs? Which he said before. It's very hard to keep track of it, but he said 100% tariffs on everything coming from China. But that maybe only lasted a day or two, or it didn't actually happen because he just says it. Yeah. That's the problem. Trump will say stuff. 100% tariffs. Sorry, we don't like what China just did. It's very unfriendly, so we're imposing 100% tariffs on everything from China. But like right now, did that just go into force right immediately? No, I just said it, and that's the news basically. Like nothing actually happened, and it's happened so often that obviously it is all just talk, basically. At least from Trump's perspective, most of it is talk. Sometimes at the very beginning, when he first started, there was some real world effects, I think, but only for a short period of time. There was people in companies in the West, because it was the first time really that Trump had said it and said it seriously, probably 6 months ago. Companies in America started bulk buying goods, of stuff that they would normally buy from China, in order to not have to pay the prospective tariffs. But then a deal was reached relatively soon, and none of that happened. So that was the only really obvious real world effect of all this talk about tariffs that has been going on for 6 months. Since then, it's all been more or less talk. I mean, markets have blipped here and there, up and down, but nothing significant has actually happened. So it's not unreasonable to call it literally all just talk, and none of it actually gets implemented. And there's obviously stuff going on, behind the scenes. But anyway, this week, the thing that stood out was, and there wasn't anything. Trump claimed that China restricting these rare earth minerals, which have significant potential impact on the West, particularly for their military and some industrial processes and stuff, but military processes. The US is very much reliant on China for rare earth minerals. I think they control about 70% of their extraction and processing in the world. So they haven't monopolized it, but they're very dominant in rare earth minerals, like I said, which are very important for military applications and industrial applications in the West. And if America can't get access to them, then they're in trouble. So that's that's China holding not all the cards, but a big chunk of the cards. And And in that context, everything that Trump would say about, we're going to do this to China, we're going to do that to China is all really just hot air, because America pretty clearly is, I was going to say pretty clearly is way more dependent on China than China is dependent on America, but that's not necessarily true. They're just dependent on it for different things, and it's all about who would suffer more and quicker, who could make up the shortfall if there were any actual real sanctions imposed that actually went into effect and stayed there for any length of time, who would suffer the most, and how quick or how quickly one or other of the countries would begin to suffer, but neither of them obviously want to go there. So most of Trump's talk is just, that's his strategy from the beginning, is bluff and bluster. Maybe not bluff, but he shows a willingness to play hardball, so that then he can go in and, like he's planning to do this week when he's in Asia, go and talk to Xi and say, look, let's work out a really good deal. There's a framework already. So this is what you're talking about. The breaking news is that there's a framework of a deal to do with TikTok and maybe a few other things that has been agreed with China. So it's really powerful. Of course, there's nothing special about it. Everything, it's all of this stuff is stuff that happened and has happened under governments, these respective governments and the different governments around the world, between America and other governments, for forever. But none of it was ever made as public as Trump makes it. Trump likes to make it all very public, because that way he can, I think he thinks he has more leverage. You get the drop it all out there in the court of public opinion and you have more leverage, I suppose, or he thinks you have more leverage, or it becomes more real, or he doesn't like the stuff he doesn't seem to like doing stuff behind the scenes so much. Certainly stuff that he thinks would benefit from being made public and talked about openly and publicly. That's how he communicates with these other countries to a large extent, or at least initially communicates with them, and then you get your people together and go and have a chat about. So you heard what the president just said on Truth Social. Yes, we were checking that. Yes, what does he actually mean? Well, let's talk about it. So that's how Trump does diplomacy, basically, via social media initially. And I suppose that's part of his mandate as well. As the populist president, he wants to keep all of the MAGA crowd informed, or any of them that are interested informed. So he does as much stuff publicly as possible, because that's grassroots democracy, right? That's allowing the people to participate in the process. That's how they participate, via social media and seeing what's actually going on, which is a pretty big difference between, compared to previous, the history of modern politics. He really didn't get that level of open disclosure of government policies and government intent from a president, from other administrations. It was all done on the QT behind closed doors, because people aren't really entitled or meant to know about those things. But now you are, at least to some extent. So, but then the real stuff happens behind closed doors, which is why you can kind of say that Trump telegraphing all this publicly to the people or to the world, it is mostly bluff and bluster, right? It's like, it shows a kind of intent, but when it comes down to it, it doesn't really translate to reality, which is the infuriating thing about him, and the thing that pisses off a lot of people about him. Because he just comes across as a blowhard. He'll say one thing one day and then change his mind the next day, and it's like, how do you even run a country that way? You know what I mean? You're obviously you can't say have some large scale, policy change decision today and then change it completely, reverse it completely the next day. Obviously, when you said it today, that wasn't actually implemented. But everybody hears that, and it gets reported in the media that Trump says this. They all think, oh my God, that's actually going to happen. And they don't realize that, no, Trump's just saying that just for the sake of saying it. And obviously, it would take a long time for that particular policy, let's say policy change, to actually be enacted.
Yeah.
Which allows him to just say it as if it's a thing that just happened, that I just decided, and allows him then to change it the next day, because nothing happened. All he did was say it. Nothing actually happened. And all you get is some diplomatic response. And you notice the Chinese were having diplomatic responses to things that Trump was saying, like being belligerent and saying nasty things about them, whatever, or unkind things about the Chinese. And at the beginning, so from the beginning of this year, when he started doing that, the Chinese were responding on social media, or responding by the media, saying, you know, we don't like this kind of thing that Trump is saying and doing. We totally disagree. It's not very nice, blah, blah, blah. But then quietly just stopped responding to it, because they figured out that actually this guy isn't actually serious about any of this at all. And this is just the new way that we have to learn, this new way of doing diplomacy.
Art of the deal diplomacy.
Which is... So anyway, yeah. So they tightened controls on mining and processing of rare earths. Notice that the Chinese did that. Notice they didn't say they weren't going to stop supplying rare earths to any particular country. They just said, we're going to reduce our production of them. And that was enough for Trump and his people to realize, okay, well, this is obviously probably aimed at us. And that's how the Chinese go about it, right? It's like, you know, if I'm a supplier of a certain product and I have a lot of buyers, I have a major buyer, let's say, of my products, and then one day I just say, I'm just not going to work as hard to produce my products for the next 6 months. Then the supplier goes, what the fuck are you doing? What do you mean you're doing that? Why would that? Is obviously only going to hurt, well, me primarily as your major purchaser of your products. Why would you just suddenly cut back on what you're producing? You're going to screw me over. And that's how the Chinese do it, right? Trump will turn around and say, I'm going to impose 500% tariffs directly on China and directly on Xi Jinping because he's my enemy and I don't like him. And the Chinese go, we're not going to do anything to anybody. We're just going to stop producing so many rare earth minerals just because we feel like it today. So anyway, yeah. And then Trump, in response to that rare earth scale back by China, Trump said, 100% tariffs in China. Boom, it happened. You can go straight, as soon as he said it, go straight to the markets and watch them all collapse, because it immediately happened. The tariffs all went on the moment the last word left his lips. They were immediately imposed. And the Chinese economy immediately collapsed.
And regime change happened.
And regime change happened all within an hour.
Yeah.
So Trump says that, and then nobody believes it anymore, because you've said it so many times and didn't really do it. And then this week he's flying out to Asia to go and have actual talks and make a really good deal. It's like, look, dude, just whatever. Go away. Like, what, do you really want people to just not to stop paying attention to what you're doing? Is that what you want? Because it's just maddening, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not that they will stop paying attention to what you're doing, but they'll just passively observe what you're doing from now on and not believe anything you say. And just wait until they see something, get more reliable information from someone else or from some other country, or wait until when Trump says I'm going to impose so many X% tariffs in China, forget about that. Just wait and see if China actually responds in any way, if the Chinese economy responds in any way, if the global economy responds in any way, or if there's anything that China says in response. And if they don't, then you know that it's weird, because beforehand we used to have to try and dig in the dirt and get whistleblowers to release information or inside information about what was going on behind the scenes in previous administrations. You had to do investigative reporting. You had to have people on the inside, or Washington insiders and hearsay and all that kind of stuff. And you had to try and put together or find out what was actually going on behind closed doors in administrations before now. But now it's not really any better, because yes, Trump's like basically blurting out everything that he's doing supposedly, but he's not serious about any of it. So how do you figure out what's going on? You still have to kind of wait and try and think about it and look at other sources and try and infer from a lot of different information what's actually going on, like more or less disregard what Trump is actually saying and try and find out if there's anything in the real world actually happening as a result of what he's saying. And most of the times you find that it's not. So it's almost just as hard,
Yeah. Now and then there's an elaboration that makes sense. We got it from Scott Bessent at the beginning of the summer when he said that the overall strategy is to rebalance the relationship between the two biggest economies, where we would like to see China be more of a consumer of our stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and we would like to be more of a manufacturer to sell to them. And that was it. I think that was it in a nutshell. Behind all the bluff and bluster and the 500% tariffs and the apparent mood swings, as if coming from a junkie or something, there is actually a sensible core.
Yeah,
and the Chinese acknowledged that message. They met in Switzerland.
Yeah.
At some point, I think late spring or early summer, and because Scott Bessent fleshed it out. He fleshed out publicly in an interview and also to them to their faces.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, okay. So you have grand strategy. You have common sense. There is some logic to this madness."
Yeah.
So
yeah.
for some reason, Trump has to make a great big crazy making dance about it. I suspect it's still less to do with throwing off China as the enemy than it is to do with throwing off the middlemen who stand to lose in the West from this long-term strategic shift.
Mm-hmm.
Trump probably knows this is one thing that he does know a lot about, I think, because he's been talking about how unfair it is that Japan was flooding the US market in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same dynamics of a different time. So he's well studied in the ins and outs of export-import.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually something he knows what he's talking about. And when Scott Bessent said that, I was like, okay, this is the only news. All the rest is sound and fury.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they're going for.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chinese, I think, are hearing that and going, fair enough. Makes sense.
Well, I mean, Trump, you have to read between the lines on Trump or have to try and figure it out, whatever. But that's been obvious that Trump's agenda from the beginning of Make America Great Again means he's been explicit about it at the beginning anyway, and he thinks maybe since he said it then he doesn't need to say it again, that it's about bringing manufacturing back to America,
to some extent,
not having as much as possible, and getting a fair shake in terms of the markets of the world where other countries would, like you just said, China, etc. China's big producer is the problem. You know, that's China's just not a buyer. China buys a lot of stuff, buys a lot of raw materials and stuff, but it's not buying finished products. It's making finished products and selling them to the whole world. You know what I mean? Now, Trump wants to be like China to some extent. So
Trump.
But you can't be. You know.
Have you seen the map where it's the map of the world and the countries either blue or red, and the key corresponds with whether they were their largest trade partner was the United States, blue, or China, red. And from 2010 to today, the world flipped blue, saturated blue, to saturated red. So they've been totally had the rug pulled from under them, and they just like to make it pink again.
Yeah.
You know?
Pink or red. You want as much as you can, obviously, but...
or purple.
Yeah.
Whatever combination is.
Whatever.
The balance.
Yeah. The problem is there's a world order has developed, like you said, over the past 20 years, when America was focused on in a particular way on maintaining its hegemony and controlling the world through military might and forcing people to do what it wanted to do. But we go back to the fact that it was J.D. Vance, I think, and Marco Rubio both said at some point over the past 6 months or so, mentioned the term multipolarity, and that the world was moving towards multipolarity. But that's a recognition that that's where it's going, and Trump's policies are all framed around the fact that there are these peer competitors, Russia and China, that they can't deal with militarily anymore, which that was the focus of previous administrations and the PNAC and the New American Century and the neocons and the neoliberals, etc. They were stuck in the past, let's say, and not recognizing and not accepting the fact that the world was going towards multipolarity, and their focus was on keeping other peer competitors who would be poles in that multipolar world down, i.e. Russia and China. That's why there's all the talk of potential war over Taiwan with China, and getting Russia first, dealing with the Middle East, securing the Middle East for Israel/America, then containing Russia, hopefully overthrowing Putin, destroying the Russian economy, getting access to the resources, then focusing on China, and we're going to just double down on our dominance in the world and making everybody a client state. So in that sense, compared to what I was saying last week, Trump is obviously, I think, still better in that respect than what you would have had under Kamala.
Yay, we're back on the Trump train.
For the globe, globally, let's say. But I don't think it's not going to be, as much as he talks about being such a great deal maker and all that kind of stuff, I don't think it's going to be as easy as he thinks to do what he wants to do. That America can survive a transition into a multipolar world, at least with the standard of living it has enjoyed for the past 80 years. And that's the big problem, is transitioning to a multipolar world away from an American dominant world almost by definition means that America has to take a smaller share of the pie, which almost by definition suggests a reduction in the standard of living of Americans. And that's the one thing Americans are not used to, and the one thing no American president wants to preside over, to be the one who oversaw a reduction in America's overall economic wealth or development, let's say. So, and again, he's left, like he keeps saying over and over and over again, the Ukraine war is not his war. But he's not so stupid as to think, well, look, I inherited this war. It's not my war. It never have happened. If I had been president in the second term and under Biden, whatever, if that was me, we wouldn't have had this war. It would never have started. But since I inherited it, and we've gone a long way, 3 years by the time he came in, almost to 3 years down the line of actually having this war against Russia, basically via Ukraine, which was designed to contain Russia and impoverish Russia, let's say. The progress that has been made in that respect is not something Trump's just going to turn around and walk away from. That's why you have this impasse over Trump's 9th successful peace settlement, if you believe all the other 8, because he could. Everybody's saying, look, he could obviously just, America calls the shots. America's supplying all the weapons. If America just stops supplying weapons to Ukraine, then the war will be over very quickly. But he doesn't do that. Why? Well, because there's a conflict there. Sure, he wants to end it. It's not his war. It would never have happened. I want to end it. But he doesn't want to end it in a way that he sacrificed or looks at gift horse in the mouth, effectively, where he doesn't get something from the investment that has been made into the 3 years before he came into Ukraine. And not only that, not just the investment, but also it's not just the sunk cost, but it's also the potential investment that can be extracted from it going forward. Essentially, just going to hand it all to Russia, because that has potentially would have a negative economic impact on the West in general and including America. So that conflicts with his economic policies. So he's conflicted about the war in Ukraine. He wants it to end. Wasn't my war. 7,000 soldiers exactly every single week are dying, supposedly, according to Trump. And it should never happen. It needs to be over. It's just a ridiculous war. It should stop. Well, then stop supplying weapons.
But he doesn't.
What? I want to keep supplying the weapons so that the war can end in such a way that America, and by implication Europe, and by implication America, doesn't significantly lose out as a result of it.
What can they realistically win, given the level of commitment to it as a proxy war?
Well,
and Russia's victory in the attrition process. The rump state, what's left?
Half of Ukraine, right? Landmass, minerals, resources, just land resources, investment by American companies in rebuilding. America obviously has an interest in Europe remaining not necessarily strong and wealthy, but at least viable, because America's interested in supplying gas and oil, replacing Russia in Europe. Obviously, Nord Stream, etc. Europe, Germany in particular, but many European countries were, buying and using a lot of Russian oil. And again, that's just economics. Trump has no problem with Nord Stream being blown up, because Nord Stream missing means America Stream comes online and they sell a lot of LNG at twice the price or 3 times the price to Europe. But Europe can't be destroyed. Europe's industrial base can't be destroyed too much, because then it's like, by America or by whatever processes, because Europe is an important customer for America. So Trump doesn't want to lose Europe as a customer for American oil and gas and other goods. So he's invested in. At the end of the day, in a multipolar world, there are 3 poles. In a future multipolar world, there are 3 poles. It's Russia, China, largely Russia, China, and America. So Russia and China are peer competitors economically. Trump doesn't like to see them as peer competitors. They are peer competitors militarily, but he doesn't want to go down that route. So he's focused on the economics. So they're peer economic competitors. So he's waging economic war, one way or another, against them. But obviously, he's not a zero-sum game kind of guy like the neocons, etc. He's into making super good deals. But when you make super good deals, you have to play hardball. And the super good deal has to be particularly super for America, because it can't really always be super for everybody, right? Maybe it can, maybe it can't. Is that too idealistic? I don't know. But for example, Nord Stream 2, America or Europe buying a lot of Russian gas and oil. The Europeans are all, most of them, the vast majority of them are all like, right, no more Russian gas or oil ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And America's like, woohoo! You know what? Because we get lots of oil and gas for you. So does Trump or whoever in the US want to see the war ended, and relationships between, if the war ends in some, negotiated settlement where everybody's happy, and then after a few years, like Russian gas and oil doesn't go away, right? And then after a few years, and one of the Nord Stream pipelines is still functional. After a few years, the oil and gas from Russia, particularly the gas, restarts the flow into Europe, and the flow from America of LNG right now that's happening to replace Russian gas all dries up. What's Trump's position on that, do you think? Would he like to see a nice, peaceful settlement where Europe and Russia become friends again and everything goes back to the way it was before, where 50% of Europe's energy needs are provided by Russia and America can go fish?
That's where it's like, it doesn't quite make sense to me where, as things stand, the militarily and everything, Russia keeps, inching along, taking cities and towns week after week. And meanwhile, the European economy, as they continue to try and stop sending money to Russia by buying their natural gas and oil and all that, their economies continue to shrink.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's one of the things that happened during COVID, where there was a number of companies, big companies, that once they were shut down, there was no bringing them back up again.
Mm-hmm.
So as this war continues to wage on, because ostensibly they're looking to make a better deal, but the economy that they would be trying to broker a deal with is getting smaller and smaller the longer it drags on.
Mm.
So it seems like the longer this goes on, the worse of a deal can be made.
The worse of a deal for?
Oh, freaking everybody, it seems like.
Not for America. America's sitting back as usual and waiting to capitalize on the fallout of these kind of conflicts, right? That's what they've done. That's what they usually do. Start a war somewhere else, separated by their Atlantic Ocean, and start a war over there. The fallout, we come in, rebuild on the, scoop up the pieces, rebuild, capture governments, and make.
So I guess in that sense, it doesn't really matter how far Europe falls, so long as it doesn't fall completely, because the amount of purchasing of LNG and stuff that was coming from America was basically non-existent, or like it was
relatively small,
very, very small. So even if the European economy tanks dramatically, the increase in sales from America to Europe would still be a net. Okay,
yeah, a net increase, yeah. And they're not. Trump wants to. I mean, that's what fuels. I mean, America is, I think, the number one oil producer, or sorry, consumer. Anyway, it produces a lot of different types of oil products and gas products, and he wants to drill, baby, drill, right?
Yeah.
Because obviously there's that's a major powerhouse of the global economy. If you're an oil producer, oil and gas producer, you produce energy resources and sell them you're able to sell them to the rest of the world. So I need a market for that, right? And he's looking for new markets all the time. And so he's not going to look. This is a gift horse in the mouth. The Ukraine war, despite what he says about it not being his war, etc., it's a gift horse he's not going to look in the mouth, right? So that's why, for me, anyway, that's how you can explain his ambivalence on it, because the obvious question is Trump yammers on about Ukraine repeatedly, over and over again, every opportunity he gets, no matter what he's being asked about. He'll say, oh, and by the way, yeah, Venezuela, or yeah, Malaysia. Oh, and by the way, I just wanted to say that Ukraine war, I didn't start that war. That's not my war. It would never have happened if I hadn't. If I was president, it would never have happened. It needs to stop. It's a ridiculous war. 7,000 soldiers every single week. Exactly 7,000 soldiers are dying every single week. Did I mention that? Yeah, you mentioned it like 1 hour ago. But anyway, that needs to end. And I didn't know. I thought it was going to be pretty easy. I thought the other ones would be more hard, and this would be easy. But it turned out the Ukraine-Russia thing is more difficult than all of them. Isn't that a doozy? Wow, who would have thought of that? And the main reason is because there's not a lot of love there's a lot of hate actually between that Zelensky and Putin. They just really hate each other, and that's why I was like, so it's nothing to do with the fact that you're just continuing to pump weapons into the conflict, and you have personnel on the ground in Ukraine organizing and planning and coordinating attacks against Russia.
And you're threatening.
Why don't you ever mention
Tomahawks?
And threatening Tomahawks and then removing the threat of Tomahawks. Surprise, surprise.
I've got a chart here. I've read elsewhere that this could not be the case, that the US could hypothetically fill in the gap in the market.
But some of it.
Well, oilprice.com says they could, at least for gas. But anyway, they do an analysis. At the moment, no, but over time, yes, they could. And that would be a long-term strategic goal. Yep. But if you scroll down to, I think, the first chart, it has a recent years. So here it is here. Exhibit 1, US LNG exports to Europe have risen sharply since Europe's energy crisis in 2022. America's proxy war. I love how it's Europe's energy crisis. What a shame. It's a natural occurrence. No, you made it happen, you fuckers. So if you look at the chart, January 2017 through at the bottom, June last year, 2024. The dark blue is US LNG to Europe. It was 0. Or close to 0. Look at it now.
Yeah. It's up 50%. Yeah.
50 million metric tons or something, whatever the unit is. It's the bulk. That's a racket. That's proxy war is a racket.
That's a result
to paraphrase Smedley Buckler.
Well, that's an example of just what we've been saying in the long form. We should have just produced this. June 17th, nothing, and then up to 1920, they start producing more, because already before the Ukraine conflict, there was a lot of pressure being put on. There was a lot of talk amongst European leaders of, evil Russia. We got to back away from Russia. We got to diversify from Russian energy. Even before they blew up Nord Stream 2, they were already starting to buy less of Russian oil and more American. And then once the conflict started, it spikes way up. And that's a clear significant economic benefit to America that happened as a result of the war that is not Trump's war, that he wants to end. So somebody obviously, he's looking at it and saying, well, okay, I want the war to end, but I don't want it to end in such a way that this benefit, as depicted by this graph, suddenly is upended, and we no longer have that economic benefit. I want to keep the economic benefit, i.e., no rapprochement between Russia and Europe, no reverting to Europe buying Russian gas. They keep buying our gas and more of our gas, but I also want the conflict to end. But for the Russians, that's like, well, hang on a minute. That's actually, that's economic warfare. You're part of the, like, it's not just Russia's kind of security interests. When Putin says that the core problem, the core causes of the conflict need to be addressed in any peace settlement, that's what they keep saying to the Americans. And they say, they refer in general to Russia's security interests need to be respected. Now, Russia's security interests aren't just military, they're economic as well. But in true form, the Americans, the deep staters who started this war, started this conflict, did it in such a way that they weren't going to have it just as they hope anyway that it wasn't just going to be a conflict that then would end after X number of years, and then relations would normalize. They tried to include within it, or throughout the course of the war have been trying to include within the whole process a souring of relations between
generations.
Europe and Russia for generations. Thereby, it's the old story. It's the old Cold War strategy. Keep the Russians out,
the Germans down,
and
the Brits in, or something like that.
Yeah, but basically, what it means is keeping Europe, particularly Western Europe, but as much of the EU now, so it's include much of Eastern Europe as well. Keep that all as part of an American alliance, that Europe can never go to any significant degree eastwards. It needs to always be looking west and be within the Western sphere of influence, i.e. the Anglo-American or the American sphere of influence.
Hard realities are taken into account by Trump, though. In his some Polish or maybe Ukrainian journalist at the White House press corps, after he last met Zelensky there last week, says, what about Hungary? Cozying up there to Russia, and he cut straight to the chase on economics. She asked him a question about military, can we trust Hungary and NATO? And he cut straight to the chase and said, well, Victor, my good friend, Victor, he's explained to me that they're a landlocked country and they've got one oil source that comes through a pipeline. Obviously, I'm saying it better than he said it, but this is what he clearly did imply. Obviously, in their situation, they need the oil to come from the east. So we're not going to be that adamant about smashing up all relations with Russia from here on out. So part of the long-term compromise will have to be, realistically,
that Russia can have Hungary and
Western
we'll have the rest.
Europe and Eastern Europe are two different beasts, which is what it was in the Cold War. So if you look at the whole sweep of the last 100 years between Lebensraum and NATO's push east, it's whenever you go too far that it needs to come back. And there's structural realities. It's not ideological. Hungary's like, hello, we're landlocked. The pipeline comes in here. We can't do otherwise. Poland is easy for Poland. They have a seaport. They have LNG terminals fitted for American gas. Good for you. We don't. So any long-term solution has to take, and Trump has actually articulated that. So,
yeah. And,
down the road, that's realistically what will happen. What will happen to the EU in that? I doubt the EU can be, at the moment, Orban is trying with Fico of Slovakia to make Brussels less one track, for them to be versatile. between Eastern needs and Western needs. At the moment, it's all monolithic. Ukraine war, Ukraine war, Ukraine war. No, there's no other way. If they're going to be that adamant, the EU will break up, and you'll have to have an Eastern, so-called, Visegrad bloc. That will have to be its own confederation. If the EU if it's going to be so adamant that no, it's all of Ukraine or nothing else.
Yeah. What's pretty clear is that, like, for all his talk, Trump is not, like we said, like, there's that question of you can end the war by stop selling weapons, and of course he was unhappy about giving weapons to Ukraine, but now he's totally happy as long as it's selling weapons because we're making money. All he cares about is money, basically. At the end of the day. That's his job, that's his mandate, is to make America great again, and the way you make America great again is with money. More and more money. More and more control and more leverage, economic leverage over everybody. So, and fair enough, if the idea is everybody else is doing that, so we got to play in the dirt with everybody else. So he's continuing to sell weapons to NATO, and he talks about NATO as if he's still obviously the president of NATO. I think he called himself the president. They call me the president, but I'm not really the president of NATO. Like, there is no president of NATO, but I could be the president of NATO as well. But he also refers to them as them. Yeah, they. That NATO. It's like, you mean the organization that America basically set up? You're now calling it they? It's like you're selling weapons to NATO. Yeah. I heard about this organization called NATO. I don't know. Yeah, they like weapons, I've heard. So I give them some weapons and they pay me for them. But he's selling.
It's coy, though.
Huh?
He's not that retarded. He knows NATO is.
Yeah, well, I don't know. The problem is, he can play that game, but then he's just going to be called he's going to come across a bit of a retard. Like, I mean, who has the time and effort to kind of like decrypt his messages all the time, before you end up just going, look, the guy's just.
Well, the Russians still speak well of him.
Well, they always speak well of everybody. The Russians have a policy of never saying nasty things about anybody, regardless of what they think of them. Russians are, much better at the old diplomacy than. They're stuck in the old world diplomacy, the Cold War, the original Cold War, first Cold War, where it was all very old school diplomacy. You never lowered yourself to using any undiplomatic language about anybody, no matter who it was,
I think it was Peskov who said recently that Putin would, like you're saying, he would never be disrespectful. Mm-hmm. He might say something that was, pointed.
Yeah. Or truthful,
or whatever,
but never disrespectful. Don't never call anybody any names. Yeah,
Medvedev has no problem with this.
No, that's his job. So still selling weapons to Ukraine and continuing the conflict. There's a lot of that, but that's in order to achieve the best possible outcome for America. But the end result is that the point of that of provoking Russia into a conflict in Ukraine, i.e., having a coup. Staging a coup in 2014, getting rid of Yanukovych, the kind of mostly pro-Russian president of Ukraine, democratically elected, overthrew him with their colour revolution, installed a bunch of rabid neo-Nazi type anti-Russian nationalist types in government in Ukraine, and then began to fund, arm and train the Ukrainian military as a implied and very clear threat to Russia. So Russia, and against whenever the people in Donbass decided they didn't want to be part of this new post-coup government that was anti-Russian, the ethnic Russians in Donbass said, we don't want to be part of this country anymore, we want independence. They launch an anti-terror operation against them. The new Ukrainian, Western-sponsored Ukrainian government starts killing people over the next 8 years from 2014 to 2022. They killed about 13 or 14,000 people, civilians mostly. And then Russia decides to intervene. And Russia has no choice but to continue on, as they keep saying, until the objectives are achieved by by whatever means necessary, because they see where this is going. They obviously don't trust the West and their intentions. They're, and that whole idea of respect is, it's like, look, it's like a boxing match or some kind of combat sports, whatever, Sure, the other person is trying to pummel you into submission and punch you and kick you in the face and gouge your eyes out or whatever, but it's not personal.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. It's a combat sport, right? So you can't take it personally. So the Russians under Putin recognize that this is what the West do, and they're going to do it to the best of their abilities, and there's going to be no holds barred, and they're out to win. But again, it's not personal. And that's why Russia periodically just goes, look, just in case any of you start taking this personally or go beyond the Queensberry rules, whatever, or the rules of the game, there's penalties for that. Let's say it's a boxing match, we all try and punch each other in the face until one of us falls down and submits. But there's no eye gouging allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're not allowed to take weapons into the ring, because that goes beyond the rules. And then but if you take weapons into the ring, then we're going to take weapons into the ring. And then then there's people actually die in this sport. And that's really not the point of it. I know you'd like to take weapons in sneakily and win that way, but we're not that stupid. And we know you have that intent. We know you're those kind of people. You're not really there's quite a few unhinged people within your halls of power, basically. And we're just afraid of those people maybe going a bit too far. So we need to periodically let them know that don't go too far, because there would be serious consequences for you. Because we're both nuclear armed nations. So they started off, the goal was to capture Ukraine, make it anti-Russian. They did that. Train, arm, fund the Ukrainian military to NATO standards and use them as an implied threat against Russia, so Russia would back down. Put Russia in a bind, basically, where they have to submit. Russia saw that happening, decided, no, we're not going to walk into that, so we're going to push back kind of preemptively, which is why you get Russia's war in Ukraine, which is not like, if you provoke me, if I know, if for 10 years if for 10 years my neighbor threatens to burn down my house publicly, and then one day I see my neighbor approaching my house with a fiery brand, and before he gets to my house I run over and drop kick him in the head, am I the aggressor?
It's a bit more than that, though.
Well,
it's a bit more
basically.
like it's a bit more like your neighbor is saying that they're going to burn down your house, but it only starts with the shrub.
Mm-hmm.
That's like on the street.
Yeah,
it's not connected to anything. It's just a very small thing.
Yeah.
Then it goes to the next shrub.
Yeah,
and then it's a little bit closer, and
it's that tree beside your house.
And then it's the tree beside the house.
Yeah. So at what point do you then go and take action?
At what point is it okay to
stop your neighbor
from burning your stuff down?
And when you do that, are you the aggressor?
Yeah. Yes.
You started this war. All I was doing was innocently burning down some of your bushes. After having said that I wanted to burn down your house. And you come and attack me. I'm such a victim. So
it reminds me of someone.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's what they want to do in Ukraine. And then so Russia invades, and to protect its interests and stop this rot, basically, the nefarious intent that was very clear from the West, and they get accused of being the aggressor. But then the result is the bind that they tried to put them in, that they kind of knew it was probably plan A was just take over Ukraine and make it use Ukraine as a militarized country to threaten Russia and cow Russia and force it to submit in one way or another.
Well, they were going to forcibly retake Donbass.
Yeah, well, that was after. It was part of the process. But and if Russia did not intervene in the way that it did, then Russia would be the plan A would have been carried out, and they would have hopefully expected to be able to force Russia to submit. But they probably expected that alternative was that Russia was going to invade, and in that case, that's all good as well, because then Russia is the aggressor, and we can actually do what we were going to do anyway, which is pump a load of weapons into Ukraine in order to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian aggression. You see, the fucking
it's a win-win.
Nefarious,
duplicitous.
evil, duplicitous Machiavellian bullshit that's going on there that Russia has to put up with, you know. So and now we're going quite a long way down the road on that score, and obviously that's what's happening. Russia's the aggressor. We're pumping weapons into Ukraine, and in perpetuity. And the Europeans in particular think that they're going to be able to win in that respect, because ultimately Russia will have to
bleed out.
Yeah, have to submit or have to give in and be seen not to win and take some compromise, and they will get not all of Ukraine, but a good chunk of Ukraine that will perpetually be part of the European American sphere of influence. And because Russia invaded, even if the war ends, they'll be able to militarize and pump weapons. And, you know, Zelensky was up in, like, where was it? Norway? Was it Norway or Sweden? Gripen. Anyway, he got an order for, like, you know, 100 Gripen Swedish aircraft or whatever. Then Macron comes in and says they're going to supply a bunch of Rafale aircraft to Ukraine. So it's all about, like, you know, we're going to militarize Ukraine, basically, which is the thing that
has been going on non-stop.
Well, the thing that Russia said, that's why we invaded, and that's what we invaded to stop, but it's happening anyway because Russia invaded.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they were damned if they didn't, damned if they didn't. At least that's what the West hoped would be the case. Now, how it actually ends up, and, you know, Russia's not for turning, basically, and they're not stupid. And they have their own plans as well. So it's still to be seen how it's actually going to end up. But
Kiev is getting slammed on a regular basis now. There's two major cauldrons that have formed this week in eastern Ukraine. One is in Donetsk and the other one is in Kharkov region. It was newsworthy enough that Putin flew down to a command center with Gerasimov in military fatigues to get the news. It all looks so grim and somber when they're together, but the only reason they did that is because it's military. It's good news for them. There's about 10,500 soldiers. They say Ukrainian soldiers are completely surrounded in these two pockets, which the Russians call cauldrons. That could be an interesting development because, I mean, they're not going to fight to the death. Some of them might, but most of them are conscripts, as we know, forced conscripts even. So there could be a big breakthrough, relatively big, in this inch-by-inch war coming up soon. There's a few other items peripheral to the war. A Ukrainian drone was downed on the Kazakh-Russian border during the week. Has not been talked about, but that was most likely that was launched from Kazakhstan. Which is you see the kind of bullshit Russia has to put up with. There have been rumors that many of the drones hitting Russia's northeast are coming from the Baltics because they don't have the range to be flown from Ukraine, right? So they really are up against it. It's not just, that's partly what the long-term goal of bleeding Russia out relies on. Not just Ukraine being the battering ram or the platform with which to attack Russia, but the whole perimeter, or as much of that perimeter as possible.
Yeah.
Are they willing, you know?
Yeah, which makes you wonder who's actually running. Does Trump know any of that? I don't get the impression that Trump actually sits down and reads policy papers and studies geography and history and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how he makes decisions or where he gets his information from, but he clearly isn't very well read on geopolitics, the history of geopolitics. He just operates, he makes decisions based on the fields, obviously, and that's why they change from one day to the next. But beyond that, does he actually understand in any detail the implications of all this? And it's like, I think the Russians suspect or probably have concluded that he doesn't really know, and it's their job, or like part of their job, other than doing what they need to do. It's part of their job to try and inform Trump of these things that he doesn't know. Go over and treat him like a bit of a retard, basically, and say, respectfully, Mr. President, you're a bit of a retard. You need to understand, because obviously your people aren't explaining to you the situation. Like, based on, at least on what you're doing and what you're saying, we don't get the impression that you're actually being well informed by your advisors. So it's almost like they feel that they have to be Trump's advisors, from afar. Like this, Putin was at he had a visit to the Joint Forces Command Center in Russia recently, and this is just a list of kind of things that he talked about. One was, number. This isn't the list in the way. Well, maybe it is in order of the way he said them. But the first thing is he's like saying, by the way, so it's all addressed to Trump, right, Mr. President. Mr. Donald Trump, we have to remind you that Russia's nuclear forces are the most advanced in the world. Now, before you say anything, maybe have a think about that. Maybe go and have a Diet Coke, sit down, think about that. Secondly, we have just successfully tested the Burevestnik, which is a nuclear-capable cruise missile. You've been talking about cruise missiles to Ukraine. We just had further successful tests that we've been doing for the past 5 or 6 years of this new nuclear. It was one of the weapons that in 2018, I think, that the Russians announced, along with this cavitation torpedo that could travel very quickly and was nuclear capable. And I think part of the idea of that was that it would be carrying like basically it wouldn't be for explosive, but it would be able to hit the shore basically, or land on the shore, hit the shore of an enemy, an enemy's territory, and release a lot of radiation basically, i.e. making a large area of the coastline uninhabitable for a long time. But one of the others was this nuclear powered cruise missile, which the Americans tried to develop back during the Cold War, but they never got anywhere with it. But supposedly, and Russia has been developing it for the past 5 or 6 years, like I said, and he announced preparations to begin for the deployment of this nuclear-powered cruise missile with the Russian armed forces. So it's gone through all of the tests, and apparently it's ready for deployment into active service. And then he mentioned, congratulates the Russian military on their successes in encircling, which you just mentioned, Neil, Kupiansk, and for fulfilling combat objectives on other fronts. And that includes, I think it was 31 battalions. Now, a battalion can be up to 1,000 troops, but I think the number was about 10,000 or so. So it's probably 300 or so on average in each battalion. And there was about 30 of them. And they're all encircled. So you're talking about 10,000 men. Trump's like 7,000 soldiers between two sides are killed every week. Well, here's 10,000 that might be killed all at once. And it's interesting that there's a Russian politician who went to America this week to talk to Trump's people and advise them so that they could advise Trump, I suppose. And the two things that he said needed to be conveyed in particular were this encirclement of troops and also the development of this cruise missile. It's almost like we just want to let you know so you can convey this, because you guys seem to be living in some kind of alternate reality bubble over there where you don't actually listen to what's going on. We feel we need to be at pains to actually repeat to you what you're dealing with here. So to try and get through, because we have some hope that there's some possibility to get through to Trump. He's open to this information, but he's not getting the information. Mm-hmm. So we can transmit it via cable, we can talk on the phone, whatever, but it seems that's not working because it doesn't get to Trump. So maybe we need to send our guy, and it's this one guy who has a good relationship. He's well spoken in English and stuff. I can't remember his name, but he went there to talk. He's been going for quite a long time.
Dmitry Kirlev,
right? So he's well received in Washington. Basically, he's known there and stuff. So he went over, and those are the two things that he, in particular, wanted to stress. It's weird, like you have to go all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Washington DC just to say, look, we have this nuclear-powered cruise missile. We're not threatening anybody with it. I just want you to take stock of that and put that into the equation, because you're talking about sending cruise missiles Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine that could be used to strike Russia, but we have one that's actually way better than the any that you have, because it's basically has unlimited flight time and it could stay in the air for a very long time and avoid air defenses and stuff. So it's kind of weird. Like we're kind of are threatening you with nuclear war, but you're kind of threatening to give Ukraine the capability to inflict existential or pose an existential threat to the Russian state. So we kind of have to respond in this way to let you know that we know that that's you doing that, and therefore you would be the receiver or the recipient of any response if you were to actually go through with this. So basically what we're saying, Mr. President, is don't do that. And I know I'm not American, I'm a Russian politician, and it's weird for me to be here in Washington, D.C. saying, Mr. President, I would advise you not to do that, because usually you should have your own advisors who would say that, but those guys don't seem to be able to do that. So that's why I'm here. And also on the other front, it's like things aren't going very well for your war in Ukraine. You know, as much as you want to end it and stuff, we're on, you know, the Ukrainians are on the back foot. We're on the advance. There's this encirclement of 10,000 troops. Okay, it's not the end of the war, whatever, but it's not going in your favor. So maybe it'd be good if you could consider that as well, just in terms of your policy about making peace in Ukraine and supplying weapons to Ukraine via that group, NATO. And the other one was that I highlighted there was preserving the lives. I just put that in because preserving the lives of Russian servicemen remains a top priority and must guide all decisions on the battlefield. That has been the policy from day one of this conflict, and it speaks to, for those with any sense, it speaks to the debate, or it's an answer to the ongoing debate, or let's say Western propaganda, repeated Western propaganda about that Trump again appears to believe, because he's not being well informed, he's being lied to, because I'm sure the advisors Trump has, maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them on the ground are collecting information. They know very well that pretty much since the beginning of this conflict, the ratio of Ukrainian to Russian killed is 10-1 and has remained, you know, on average roughly consistent throughout the war. It's 10-1. Because Trump keeps talking about, I think he even said Russia had lost 1 million, and you know, Rubio or some others had said 1 million. Like basically they have inverted it and they're publicly saying that. Now, do they know that? That's the problem. They say it to the press and the Russians go, do they know? Do they actually believe that, or is that just propaganda? Because we can understand that they would be saying that just as from a propaganda point of view, saying the Russians are being killed at a rate of 10-1 to the Ukrainians, so Russia's going to fall. And like the Russians are sitting there looking at that and going, like, that's not true. It's actually the opposite. But we can't tell because we don't get a lot of clarity from your side, from the American side. We can't tell if you actually believe that or not. And that's why you're actually pursuing this war, continuing to pursue this war by providing weapons to Ukraine. That you actually believe that we've lost 1 million soldiers and the Ukrainians have lost 100,000, when it's actually the opposite. So we just want to get some clarity in this. Do you know that this is not going... I mean, that's just propaganda, right? Because it seems to us that you actually believe your propaganda, because it seems to us that any rational person, if they really knew the actual numbers and how the war was actually going and the threat that... you know, that you seem to be talking about with Tomahawk cruise missiles, that the threat that would pose to Russia and the response from Russia, it seems like you're all believing this narrative that you're on the brink of defeating Russia, when it's exactly the opposite. So if you're laboring under that belief that you're on the brink of defeating Russia and just a few Tomahawk cruise missiles aimed at Red Square would finish the deal, you're incredibly mistaken. And we don't want you to make that incredible mistake. So we'd really like to get some clarity, because we can't tell from the way you talk and the way your diplomats and stuff talk, we can't tell if they actually believe that bullshit. It's confusing for us because we know there's propaganda that you put out to the public, but we generally assume that you know it's propaganda and you don't believe it. You know the actual truth behind it and you operate on that truth rather than the propaganda. But it seems to us that you, and Trump in particular, is operating on the basis of propaganda as if it's true. So can we get some clarity on that? Because it really is risky here, because cruise missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles hitting Moscow is the brink.
Yeah. Kirilev also said...
Like, pull your hair out. Like, if I was Russian, I'd be like banging my head against the wall. I'd be going to Jerusalem and headbutting that wall.
Whenever Kirilev visits DC, he gives an interview or two. He gave one to Fox this time, and Lara Logan. Do you remember her?
Mm-hmm.
She's pretty, like, it's alternative. That's the MAGA base. Listen to her, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And he had free reign, and he would come up with, actually, it's this way or that way, and she wouldn't not only push back on him, she revealed that she knows a lot more.
Yeah.
And she went further and further, and he was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
Pleasantly surprised.
Except she's not in government.
She's not in government, but...
and she doesn't have Trump's ear.
Yeah, I just did a Google search, Russia meat grinder, and yeah, the zone is flooded, man. MSN 2 days ago, Putin's front line is, all caps, collapsing. Russia lost 5 times more troops than Ukraine last month.
Yeah.
So
It's
the
all lies.
unreality is saturated everywhere. It doesn't reach the White House. I think so. Kirillov said that
they had another body exchange just recently.
Yeah.
One of many that have come before, and the ratio again was very similar to what it has been before, which is Ukraine received 1,000 bodies and Russia received 31. And that's happened repeatedly over and over again. How many times does that have to happen before your narrative of, oh, well, that's because there's a lot of Russian bodies that are unrecoverable? It's like that doesn't make any sense. Russia's basically been on the advance. The bodies that are unrecoverable are on the Ukrainian side. On average, they're way more on the Ukrainian side than on the Russian side because Russia is the one advancing and taking territory. They don't do the meat grinder thing where they just throw 10,000 troops running across Ukrainian territory breaking through the Ukrainian lines and then lose the bodies there. That's not how they operated. How they've been operating.
I think they know. I think they know better. Zelensky didn't get a press conference when he went to DC. He had to hold it outside on the street.
Yeah.
He's definitely on the out, so to speak.
Yeah, I just hope that that's the case. That there's some sanity. But it's the Europeans are a problem.
The Europeans and the NATO,
which is now the Europeans, apparently.
Well, it's not really. It's still the U.S. deep state,
right?
So look, we've seen this a dozen times this year. Let's just put it up for a new iteration. This is from RT, but it was first reported by a French TV network, BFM TV, which actually had the chef de l'armée of France on air to state exactly this. To reiterate that France is ready to send troops into Western Ukraine next year.
That's according to the Russians.
No.
Army Chief Saint-Pierre Schill. Who's he? A Frenchie?
He's the chef de l'armée. He's the top general since the last guy was killed by Russia in Ukraine, which no one's allowed to know about.
But you know what that means? That can be seen as, we're going to go to war with Russia, or it means that they're expecting next year that the war will end. And they will send peacekeeping troops.
That's what's
peacekeeping troops. I'm not talking about actually continuing the war by having European soldiers fight directly with the Russians.
Yeah.
So it's peacekeeping stuff, and maybe so. That's all it is, really. Is that?
But Russia has said that would be a hot war.
Yeah. They don't want any NATO quote unquote peacekeeping troops in Ukraine because that's their goal, was to militarize Ukraine along NATO lines and capture it for NATO and have it as a perpetual, military threat to pressure Russia.
Speaking about subtle or explicit threats to dirty bomb, this is a bit worrying. Georgia, again, another periphery Russian neighbor, arrests 3 for trying to illegally buy 2 kg of uranium. I think the context is, it's just scroll down.
Chinese nationals.
The alleged plot was unearthed by intelligence agents. So that's not police work after gangsters. That's intelligence agents on it. Well, one member of the group was attempting to buy the radioactive substance.
So you mean, okay, so this could be, it could be just what it is. It could just be a cigar, but what you're talking about is that
Georgia,
it could be trying
it's where snipers came to the Maidan, it's
and setting up.
Georgia is a deep state little.
But it's setting up, it's setting up China. That's a perps, if it's Chinese nationals buying it. Oh, remember that report about the Chinese nationals buying uranium?
Yeah.
Those Chinese nationals made a dirty bomb and dropped it in Washington, D.C. Let's blow up China.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a black market stuff going on. I don't know what 2 kg uranium. What did they say? 400,000.
Okay, it might just be a cigar then.
400 grand, making some money. Who knows? But I mean, I'd say the people who would, if that were to happen, and if it was to be some kind of a false flag operation, they wouldn't be getting caught. If that's possible, the people who would carry that out, to carry out a dirty bomb attack, I doubt they'd get nabbed by Georgian police, basically. You know.
Well, at least in this case, they were caught trying to buy it, and in such a case, they wouldn't need to buy it because
exactly.
it would be provided.
Right,
for them.
They would have it
would just be
from other sources. Yeah,
the things you need are going to be here.
Yeah, or they give them to whoever the purpose or to somebody. They take it from an American stockpile, right?
American.
Yeah.
The Financial Times again claimed that this is how Zelensky's visit to the White House last week actually went down. This could be the Brits stirring up shit, but Trump urged Zelensky to accept Putin's terms or be destroyed by Russia.
Does that mean Zelensky would be destroyed by Russia?
Yeah. Ukraine, I suppose. His regime, yeah.
The US president tossed aside maps of Ukraine, of the Ukraine front line. Said, I don't need no maps. Where's Ukraine anyway?
Go ahead, scroll down. Let's try and read some of that.
I just go with the feels. How does Ukraine feel today, Mr. President?
The meeting descended many times into a shouting match, with Trump cursing all the time.
Trump doesn't curse.
He drops the F-bomb all the time these days. Trump insisted Zelensky surrendered the entire Donbass region to Putin.
Which is what the Russians want.
Yeah.
And echoed talking points.
The Russian media.
That's the Putin's thing. Talking points.
Oh my God.
There's kind of the running joke that Trump's policy is whoever he last talked to.
Yeah.
So he saw Zelensky after his call with Putin.
Well, that's a common trope, anti but from the media, you know, like say you're just, or whoever can say that they don't like what you're saying, you're just echoing, especially when it comes to Russia, you're just repeating Putin talking points.
Well, insert bad person of the day. It's an Assad talking point.
Yeah, that's an Assad talking point. Please wait, getting talking points from
the FSB.
The FT will have their slant on this because they're speaking for the old money of the empire. But I imagine Zelensky got his ears torn off him by Trump. Definitely, because Trump has more or less publicly said to Zelensky before, look, just cut your losses, basically. But Zelensky's been told, then Zelensky will leave and meet Lindsey Graham, and he's told, no, my son, you can have it all and more. You can have up to Moscow if you want, you know. So, and
we don't know. The thing we don't know, because there's no Trump in Russia, is we don't know. We can't glean. We can't infer from the Russians, because they're, you know, classically fairly tight-lipped and circumspect and diplomatic about the way they talk about things. We don't know what the Russians' ultimate vision is or plan, or, you know, what they see, where they see the end game going. You know what I mean? Of course, maybe they don't know for sure, but I'm sure they have a few different scenarios fleshed out as to how this will ultimately play out, you know, but they obviously don't make it public, you know. All you can get is that they're obviously proceeding with the SMO, and they keep on saying that the objectives of the SMO will be achieved one way or another. And the objectives of the SMO ultimately includes the removal of Zelensky and the people around him, and some kind of a coup and the installation of a different government. It doesn't preclude the idea that part of Ukraine or half of Ukraine or whatever or 3/4 of Ukraine would fall into the Western sphere, but they want to end the conflict. They want to get rid of these warmongers and have the conflict end, and want to achieve their goals as they've stated repeatedly, which is they at least want all of Donbass, i.e. Luhansk and Donetsk. They're willing to freeze the front line and only take what they have of Kherson and Zaporizhia and leave it at that. And the rest of Ukraine can be Western, but no Western, that the rest of that country, still called Ukraine, will be non-aligned. And so no NATO troops, whatever. And so we need to get to that point. We can deal with the NATO troops and French troops and all that kind of stuff after the fact. But the people who have to go, Zelensky has to go. Zelensky has to be and the people around him have to go. Those warmongers, the ones that are sucking up to the Europeans and are like hand in glove with the Europeans in Ukraine, they have to go. And Russia has to get there.
Inside Russia, it's like 80 to 95% public support for Kharkiv and Odessa. The full Novorossiya of old.
Mm-hmm.
I think they don't articulate that because they play judo. They're waiting for the next counteroffensive to give them the energy they need to go, now you fuckers. And they've given hints at it. Their chief negotiator in Istanbul, who the Ukrainians and Westerners just, dismissed as, who is this? Nobody. He sent an underling. Why Putin himself does not go? Well, he's a bit of a genius because he gave this little brief history on the Swedish War, the Northern War, the Russians call it. It was super smart because he said over 30 years it took for that settlement to be concluded. What's known as St. Petersburg today became Russia, that area, because the Swedes refused to give up anything. And every time they got back to negotiations, the Russian demand was
more
bigger. They'd earned more. Oh, we're going again? More?
Yeah.
Are you done yet? More. I think that's what's going on. I think that is their plan. Their plan, let me put it this way. Do you think 2014 came along and the Russians went, well, oh my goodness. Well, what just happened here? That's shocking. Quickly. So, someone draft a plan. I know, we'll take Crimea. Do you think they just came up with that on the spot? No, they were waiting for 15, 20 years.
Well,
they watch how the empire works. Well, it's an automatic machine. They know what it's going to do next.
Well, the West have been interfering in Ukraine for
since 2004.
Yeah. They had color revolutions there before, so the Russians were very well aware of it. But I mean, the other aspect that again is hard to figure out. Because you don't have information, we know the very likely 10-to-1 roughly ratio of Ukrainian to Russians killed. But how many Ukrainians are left to be able to actually pursue this war? I think that's a major pillar of the Russian strategy here, which is like ultimately it's a war of attrition. Because at the end of the day, you win a war when there's no more soldiers on the other side to actually fight, or not none completely, but so few that it's not possible for them to actually maintain any kind of defense. And at that point, well, then it collapses. The Ukrainian military collapses. It can no longer fight back. And at that point, if necessary, you get rid of the government. The Russians get rid of the Ukrainian government one way or another. And then they can fly in. They don't have to march in from where they are, but they can fly in significant numbers of Russian military personnel to take
Kiev directly.
Not necessarily Kiev. I don't think they take Kiev, but like you said, Odessa.
But they did at the beginning.
Odessa, well, that was just a kind of feint, maybe. But Odessa and Kharkiv,
Yeah.
There's only so much land as well. There's obviously part of the whole strategy around this is how much of Ukraine does Russia actually want to take, and that's informed by how much they're able to take, in the sense of able to
take and defend
into the future. How much you're going to need military personnel, obviously, for a period of time. Initially, after a war, you're going to need to secure areas. If you take more, you're going to secure them.
Air defense systems,
especially with the Europeans threatening to send troops in. Right?
New air force at them.
Yeah. So you can definitely, there's only so much they can reasonably hold, how much territory they can reasonably hold. They probably have made those calculations, and also you've got the demographics in terms of the population and how friendly towards Russia, or how accepting a population of any given city would be to becoming part of the Russian Federation. Odessa they'd probably get away with, Kharkiv probably as well, but beyond that, I think Kiev would be a bit too much, because you don't want to end up in some kind of guerrilla war or some kind of popular uprising and all that kind of stuff.
I wasn't thinking of Kiev as becoming Russian, but Kiev friendly.
Well, you could occupy
Russian friendly.
Well, yeah, you could occupy it for a while, and then kind of make sure that a new government gets installed that is like, neutral at the least. And then you can retreat to, and then define the new lines of which areas become part of Russia and which are left with rump Ukraine, And that all ties in with next year, the French troops being into, and I think that's as much as you should read into that, French or German or Polish or whoever troops going in, is to secure what they're forced to accept after Russia actually wins, i.e., or to try and, it's like a land grab basically.
How
get our people in there.
I hear you, and that makes the most sense. But how are they going to spin that into a win? Because they have to uphold the Euro globalist regime. It's fucked if they'd have to take that as a loss.
Well, they're pretty good at spinning bullshit into the media. And I mean, they've been saying that Russia's been losing this war for the past 4 years almost, 3.5 years. Yeah. They've repeatedly been telling themselves and everybody else, Russia's losing, Putin's about to fall, Putin's got cancer.
There's a story this week of a 23-year-old trying to leave Ukraine. They took a train to near the border with Belarus, and then security, I guess maybe conscription guys, you recognize they were after him. When he was stopped, he detonated a grenade. He killed himself and the people apprehending him rather than give up and fight.
Yeah. The other element is Trump decided no Tomahawks but sanctions. So he went for sanctions, true form, right? So he's not a war president. No more. We're not going to threaten Russia with Tomahawk cruise missiles, but we are going to threaten them with sanctions. We imposed the bestest sanctions ever. Of all the sanctions that have been really, really good,
19 is the new number 1, baby.
Exactly. So this is the bestest sanctions ever this week. He announced it pretty much after they made the decision, that Zelensky wasn't getting his Tomahawk cruise missiles. He said, okay, sanctions instead. So sanctions primarily against the two major Lukoil and what's the other one? Rosneft. Two major Russian oil companies, sanctions against them. And the sanctions being not against them, but sanctions against them, and by implication, sanctions against anybody buying oil from those companies, i.e., and this was targeted at
India.
Trump spun this into China and India. China and India have already decided, okay, we submit, Mr. President, we're not going to buy any more Russian oil. But this is just him announcing it, and a reporter actually saying that Putin responded to that statement by Trump about the sanctions that, we're pretty much immune to those. We don't care. They've tried it before. It doesn't matter. Putin brushed it off, So here's how I listen. And watch Hegseth as well.
President Putin basically said today that Russia is immune from U.S. sanctions. He said that it would not impact the Russian economy in any serious way. Is he wrong?
I'm glad he feels that way. That's good. I'll let you know about it in 6 months from now. Okay, let's see how it all works out.
Oh yeah, thinks he's a smart fella, that Putin, huh? Not going to affect him. Well, just wait 6 months. So, Mr. President, we've waited 6 months, and Putin still said that your sanctions were a nothing burger. Oh yeah? Well, I'm glad he feels that way. Just wait another 6 months. And then we'll see. 6 months later. So, Mr. President, do you have... Hegseth's laughing, chuckling away there. Yeah, Putin. We'll just wait and see. Yeah, that Putin, and what do you call it, Pam Bondi's having a good chuckle to herself. Oh, see them are like smirking, Oh yeah? Putin doesn't know what sanctions are. We've just been playing. See how my sanctions, when I talked him up? Yeah, they're all bullshit. They don't have any effect at all. But these are the real ones. I ain't playing anymore. These are real sanctions.
You have yet begun to see my tariffs.
You haven't begun to see. These are the sanctions. Everyone's just been foreplay before. This is the pound. This is the pound and sanction.
Did you have a look? What is so substantially different about these?
What? India, China, no longer ban Russian oil. It's not about, obviously, Rosneft. They're not banning Russian oil anyway, right? So no point in sanctioning Rosneft. It's the sanctioning of those two companies means that anybody buying gets sanctioned by implication. So it's his vaunted secondary sanctions, although not stated explicitly, but it's implied, obviously, that those companies are companies non grata, and nobody in the world can buy anything from those companies, or they'll be sanctioned.
What if they're buying with their own currency
Well, sanction their currencies.
or swaps or presumably? I mean, I'm pretty sure the Russians and the Chinese don't use the dollar anymore for
But yeah,
core consumables like oil
but
and
they'll,
gas.
but they'll
So the sanctions they're sanction proof.
except they'll be sanctioned on other things. Trump will go back to his 100% tariffs on all Chinese goods and then change it the next day.
Yeah, but he's got a deal to make.
Just wait and see. They are the deal. Don't try and understand it.
Just enjoy winning.
It's 47 to D chess.
Just enjoy the wins, Neil. The winds of change.
The wins.
Yes.
So bullshit.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. People, the media have been talking about. Trump said it, and then the media have been reporting. There's not a lot of noise. India initially said that it would just didn't sound explicitly said we'll continue to buy resources that our country needs on the basis of the economic interests of India, and China hasn't said anything about it really, except condemning it as as they have done of sanctions in general, that it's not a good idea, don't do this. But they haven't said explicitly that, we will continue to buy Russian oil. As the media is spinning that as, Chinese have buckled, right? The Chinese have bent the knee. They're not going to buy any more Russian oil. And Trump has said that as well. And that's where we're going to hurt Russia. We're going to pressure Russia to come to the table and do the peace deal that I want them to do in Ukraine, by forcing China and India to stop buying Russian oil on pain of sanctions imposed on them for buying Russian oil. Except the sanctions that they tried to impose in those two countries before didn't work. But that's why you shouldn't think about it too much.
Yeah, I have questions. One of them would be, why wouldn't Biden do that before?
Biden blew up Nord Stream.
Okay.
He got the ball rolling. Because it's dangerous. Because, probably Biden and maybe really only Biden, or even Obama before Trump, they didn't do it because, even though we can make fun of Trump because of the way flip-flops and sanctions, it's obviously not an easy thing to do. You can't do it without hurting yourself. It's like basically,
yeah.
It's like, I mean, it's very simplistic, but say you're either a producer or a purchaser of goods. Say you're a purchaser of goods, or say you're a manufacturer of goods, and you have a customer that you sell to, and for whatever reason you fall out with a customer, you say, I'm not going to sell anymore to you. It's very simplistic, but it kind of goes to the heart of why it's difficult. What happens if you stop selling to your biggest customer or one of your customers?
He looks elsewhere.
He stops buying from you. And what happens to your bank balance then? You know what I mean? Oh, but I can find other suppliers. Oh yeah? Go ahead. And what if your supplier then starts helping your competitor? You stop selling to your supplier, or you stop selling to the guy who purchases from you, and he goes and purchases from your competitor. That's just very simplistic, obviously, but it shows you how it's not so easy just to run around saying, I'm going to stop either buying or selling from you. I mean, it's an economy. Somebody's going to suffer, and in fact, you in a circular economy like that, you run the very high risk of hurting yourself.
Yeah,
which is probably why it was never really done to any significant degree before, because it's very high risk. It's not so easy just to suddenly stop buying something that you've been buying for a long time and just immediately find another supplier.
Yeah. Well, what the Europeans did was buy it from India now too. Yeah. Buy Russian oil.
Yeah.
But now Trump's suggesting, now we're seriously going to physically stop its departure from Russia, which will cause a massive gap in the international markets, a spike in oil prices, so that's an increase in Russian income.
Exactly.
For example,
that's a more complicated aspect of it as well, which is when it's specifically related to oil or any product, really. If you threaten or somehow stop a supplier onto the global market of a certain product, stop them from supplying it onto the global market, the price of that product will immediately go up. And what if you buy that product and now the prices are all higher, and that gets all passed on to your consumers? and all the people in your country now are very unhappy that the fact that this particular product that they all depended on, and when it gets obviously more complicated when it's about energy, because that then increases the price across the board for all sorts of things that are made with oil or gas, right?
This happened 3 years ago. You remember with the gas prices, the knock-on effects in fertilizers, and agriculture.
It's super complicated, you know, and it's not easy to do. That's why they've never really done it to any significant degree, and that's why Trump flip-flops on it. He'll talk about it. I think he's playing hardball, but he's signaling, that's how Trump signals that he wants to make some kind of a different deal and sit down and work out some kind of a different deal. We can figure this deal in some way. We stop buying that, but we buy this instead. You stop supplying this, or we supply only half of that and more of this, and let's look at this and that and the other. He threatens people with tariffs, this kind of like blunt force instrument of tariffs, in order to get them to force dialogue, to force, okay, so you don't like what I just said about 100% tariffs and you, okay, I'm going to send my people over and we're going to work something out, okay? And that's how business is done. And Trump's a businessman. One example is we know India has been, you know, buying what I think there's like a 500% or 5 times or 10 times increase in the amount of oil that they sold. They became a kind of supplier of oil when India produces very little oil, and suddenly they started supplying a significant percent of the world's oil, Indian oil, since 2022 to Europe and everybody else who were buying it from Russia before. It's such a farce, like, you know. And this is it's just today, a couple of days ago, Financial Review. Australia's military links to illegal Russian oil. The Australian Defence Force's major oil supplier cannot rule out, which is probably India, that the nation's tanks, planes and ships are being powered by fuel produced by controversial Indian refineries accused of funding. But damn those Russians, we're not going to buy their oil. Just put a dot on it. Put a red dot on its forehead and call it Indian oil, and then it's all good. And then we're not funding Russia's war machine anymore. Kind of technically, because there's now a middleman and Russia has to sell it at a cheaper price because they're selling it to India, who's then selling it on and increasing the price on it. India's getting a cut out of being the middleman. So Russia is taking a cut in the supply of its oil.
On the bright side, though,
or in the price of its oil. If
the sanctions work, then Australia's war machine will grind to a halt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they're saying,
for sure,
implicitly there.
Unless they can find somewhere else to get it. You know, I don't know about the Middle East. Can the Middle East make up the shortfall? Maybe they can. But they're talking like the Saudis and stuff have a pretty good relationship with Russia and with Putin in terms of setting oil prices, you know, setting production levels and all that kind of stuff to regulate the price of oil. So I don't think you're going to break that relationship so easily. So, because obviously the Saudis have to ramp up production. And this is how complicated it gets. If the Saudis had to ramp up, Saudis and other Middle Eastern countries had to ramp up the production of oil and gas because you had somehow stopped Russia from selling on the market, well then, and if they're able to flood the market with oil, then the price of oil goes down below what you want to actually sell it at. So that's not interesting for the Saudis. Now we don't want to ramp up production to the max to make up the shortfall, because you're going to actually, there'll be a glut on the market and then the prices will fall rather than going up. So we don't want them too high, we don't want them too low.
Yeah.
We've worked it out that there's a sweet spot in the middle where we kind of keep it generally in that sweet spot with OPEC. We all talk about it and get it fixed. And America isn't part of OPEC, and Russia is. So it's not easy.
Biden expressly asked the Saudis to increase production ahead of the election. I can't remember if it was midterms or for his probably coming up to 2024 presidential election, because the Saudis had just agreed with Russia to lower production.
Yep.
Oh, no, don't do that. And then it affects the gas prices
back
at home.
Yeah.
And that's a bad juju pre-election,
right,
as every American president knows.
Yep.
So Trump can be serious with these 6 months, but he doesn't have infinite 6 months to not be serious about it, because the midterms will come up this time next year.
That always struck me as an example of how fickle voters are. You know, yeah, what do you think about the president? Yeah, I like him. Would you vote for him again? Yeah, I'll probably vote for him again in the upcoming elections. Wait 2 weeks. So oil prices have just gone up. You're paying more at the gas pump. Do you like that president anymore? No, I hate him. You going to vote for him? No. Why? Well, because I have to pay more for my gas. It's his fault. Single issue voter. How much it cost me to fill my car. Like president, don't like president. Based on that metric alone. He could be married to a hermaphrodite. Meh, don't care. As long as the price of gas stays down, I'm happy. The president could be a hermaphrodite, and I wouldn't mind as long as he kept the gas prices down. A lot of people apparently. Well, I don't know if that's true, but that's always been a thing, you know? Like you just said, it's always been a thing where...
although...
To the point that Biden goes and asks them
Yeah.
to increase production to drop the price of oil so that he has a better chance of getting elected.
Well, it also reduces inflation in general.
Yeah.
So the voters aren't being completely myopic. It's not just
It's also
the car. It's,
Twinkies.
It's the whole basket.
Hot
of goods,
dogs.
Joe.
Hot dogs and
It's the whole,
hot dogs and
it's the whole
Twinkies.
shopping cart. I hear Americans like Trumpian, definitely Trump supporters a couple of years ago complaining that nothing's changed where it counts. Is that about right? Inflation's down, but they still feel poorer.
Well, I mean, it's like as an example, like the housing market did an astronomical, rise post-COVID, and it's tapered off. Like the mad inflation of housing prices has slowed down, but the prices aren't really coming down. You know what I mean? They're just like not getting higher as fast. I mean, in some places, things have cooled off, and so the prices are coming down because there's not such a drive for it. But even some of the things like for groceries and stuff, the prices will go up, but they never come down. Even after things change, they don't come down.
And wages aren't going up.
So that's they're right in that sense that these are things that are longstanding problems that can be affected by short-term or shorter-term issues that then lead to more long-term problems because it just never rights itself to like the new reality. It's just kind of like, well, now we're making more money.
Aircraft carrier in the military exercises in Trinidad and Tobago, not far off the coast of Venezuela. Aircraft carrier just sent there during the week.
Yeah.
How about them Venezuelans? Bunch of commies. Get them. Get them.
Narco traffickers.
Narco commies.
Narco commies trafficking.
Narco commies.
Maybe that would improve conditions for Americans.
If they can get Venezuelan
A
oil.
war with Venezuela.
Yeah. If they can get a hold of Venezuelan oil.
I'm
Although
being
apparently Maduro,
You're actually thinking about it.
he's like, meh.
Well,
Every now and again you need to throw some shitty little country up against the wall just to remind everybody that we're for reals. So, that's what we talked about before. That's Trump. That fits with Trump's kind of recognition of multipolar world and focusing on the quote-unquote near abroad, i.e. backyard. And, it's probably multifaceted. It's not just... Supposedly Maduro, do I have it there? He was asked, maybe we played it last week, did we? He was asked in the White House about how
Yes.
Maduro had offered
We
pretty
did.
much everything. I said, yeah, that's because he doesn't want to fuck around with America. Fuck yeah.
We did play that, yeah.
Yeah. So apparently Maduro offered everything, but still send the aircraft carrier and still threaten. So
I've
apparently
read-
they're not accepting Maduro's offer because Maduro, the part of the offer that wasn't included was Maduro has to go. because he's not ideologically aligned. It's one thing for a dude like that, a narco-commie, as you would say, to offer preferential deals and all that kind of stuff on Venezuela's resources and access to Venezuela's resources, but can never trust that he's not going to go narco-commie again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pretend to no longer be a narco-commie, but he could easily go back to being a narco-commie. So you want him out of the way as well, and that's probably something that Maduro didn't offer. It was like, I'll leave as well, because then there'd be no need for aircraft carriers and stuff. I let in that female Juan Guaido character, who got the Nobel Prize. Let her be president. No, there's a lot of belligerence going on still between the two of them, like in terms of how Maduro talks, and so it doesn't seem to be there's any deal that has been offered that is acceptable to Trump to diffuse the whole thing. So he's still threatening, still blowing up boats full of narco-commies and narcotics.
Narcotics, yeah.
Narcotics, which is weird because I think there's a study done, or there's information out there that basically the vast majority of those like drugs coming into America come through Mexico, come through the land border. Very few come through the ocean. But to do that, you'd have to actually invade Mexico, probably, or that's closest, right? Made in Colombia. Probably not really made in Venezuela, made in Colombia. So this is all a ruse, basically. The whole narco-trafficante thing and pinning it on Maduro seems to be a ruse, a cover for the fact that they don't like the ideological alignment of Venezuela under Maduro, and they want to change that because there has been a lot of, we don't know the extent of it, but between Russia and Venezuela, cooperation agreements and military agreements and stuff. So Trump's, if he's going to have to take a cut around the world in terms of America's former prowess and former influence around the world, he's definitely not going to lose his backyard. He's going to look to the backyard, and if there's anybody not playing ball in the backyard, they need to have a severe talking to in the form of an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, and then they'll fix the problem, like they'll bail out Venezuela, like they did Argentina for $40 billion.
Argentina's doing
and
so well.
That's how Americans do so well, you see. That's where you feel it in your purse. You vote for Trump, and then $40 billion goes to that nutcase, Milei.
Yeah, but he took a chainsaw and he was going to make Argentina great again. MAGA.
Yeah.
Latin American MAGA. Spanish MAGA.
Libertarian savior.
And it apparently didn't work out because he needed a $40 billion bailout. Somehow
getting
rid of all those,
getting his policy ideas from his dog hasn't worked out very well.
Yeah.
Surprisingly enough.
And putting the names of all the government departments on a board and then grabbing each one and going, afuera, afuera, throwing them all out. We're defunding all of these departments. We're only leaving two, the office of the president and the office of the president's dog. Everything else is going, health, education. It's all gone. And our economy tanked. Somehow. Fido. What the fuck did you tell me to do? You were wrong, Fido. The first time you were wrong. Can't believe it.
It's not just the butt of a joke. It needs to be really thought about. He believes there's an entity that his friend, who's a medium, can receive the messages from in proximity to his dog, who may or may not be called Fido. No, his dog's dead. His dog's dead.
He talks to the spirit of his dog.
The entity is attached to the spirit of his dead dog.
He's channeling his dead dog.
And he's got a medium getting what he should and shouldn't do for his country.
Yeah.
That is literally the actual esoteric platform that Argentina is run on.
That's what he dabbled in, apparently.
And they think we're weird.
Yeah. Like, what are we going to do, Mr. President? President Milei? What are we going to do today? Wait a minute. Wait. Did you get that? Yeah. Very clear. Crystal clear. Thank you. We're going to woof, 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 woof.
No, the real world consequence downstream for Americans is the beef issue.
Argentinian beef. We're going to bring in some of that delicious Argentinian beef. Bring it all in to America and help Malay and his doggy.
This time last...
But
Yeah.
America. What about America? Produces some good beef, no?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
It's great.
Which is better, though? Argentinian?
No, American.
What a difference a year makes. This time last year, they were holding out the promise, they're dangling the bait for votes, of course, that Department of Agriculture will be run by Massey with that sustainable beef rancher, I forget his name, as his number 2. And together we're going to transform the food industry in the United States. You remember?
Mm.
I forget his name, but it's on X. He's got maybe someone in chat knows who I'm talking about. That was floated as a serious plan. A year later, screw American beef. We're buying Argentinian, and the reason he gave to a reporter last week was, look, you don't understand. They're really hurting. It's to help. He gave a neoliberal argument. We got to help them.
The right to protect. But that's going to launch a new movement called MABA. The MABA movement. Make America beefy again. After we've been inundated with Argentinian beef. Make American beef beefy again. MABA.
MABA. Make American beef brilliant again. MABA.
MABA.
It'll never.
MABA.
No, it's not even that. The real sticking point is there are only 4 mega slaughterhouses for the entire US or something, and all farmers have to ship their cattle to those companies, and then it's part of decentralizing a distribution system. It maybe worked, 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's created effectively an oligarchic system there that is locked in. And Trump, he has fine words for sustainable farmers while campaigning, and then he meets, and then he realizes how entrenched that system is. He's like, I'm going to piss off some powerful people here, so I'll just back away.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated than he thought it was. Yeah, anything else? Israel still withholding aid and trying to starve Gaza. Israel being... Israeli's gonna Israeli.
Did you want to talk about the vote, the symbolic vote that was put forward by the opposition
in the
party?
Knesset, yeah, to annex the West Bank?
Yeah.
While Vance was there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Netanyahu pretended it didn't happen. It wasn't his government, but it actually was proposed by his party.
Yeah.
He just
no, that was
straight
the
up lied.
opposition.
No, that wasn't me. Yeah, well, Israeli newspaper was like, yeah, it was you. That was your party. Yep. And in fact, everybody knows that that's what you wanted to do, and all you crazies in the Israeli government have wanted to take the West Bank, obviously, because that's part of your Palestinian problem, and you've gone a long way to dealing definitively with your Gaza Palestinian problem, but you've still got the West Bank, hotbed of terrorism, narco terrorists.
Maybe I'm missing the obvious, but twice now, Vance when he was there and Trump last month have been very, blunt. There's no chance in hell the West Bank is being annexed by Israel. Why? I mean, Trump's giving away Golan Heights. You want a bit of Sinai, you want a bit of Gaza,
but not the West Bank, because it's
whatever. Bit of southern Lebanon, bit of Syria. Yeah, worth it all the way. Why suddenly is it like no?
And the West Bank it's another. I mean, that's serious upheaval. You're talking about, it's bigger, a lot bigger than Gaza, and about. What, do you want Israel to do the same thing in the West Bank as they did in Gaza?
Well, they are doing it anyway, piecemeal.
No, well, piecemeal. But you can't do it piecemeal. They figured that out a long time ago. That's why they're doing what they're doing in Gaza. There's always going to come a day when you had to go full bore, And if you have the same intent on the West Bank, then you got to do the same thing in the West Bank, because the Palestinians aren't going to go easy either. They're not going to go any easier.
Do you know the population of the West Bank?
About 2.5.
Well, it's
Maybe
similar
2.5
to
million.
Gaza.
Yeah, but bigger. And it's in the middle of Israel. In the middle of Israel. I think it's more complicated, geographically, and
They
and for
also
other
have a
reasons.
slightly
Let me just
different
check.
like government setup in the
Yeah,
West Bank.
3 million.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so far as I understood it, for example, like Hamas has an overlap in.
There is no Hamas in the West Bank.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is like Hamas in Gaza has a no two-state solution kind of policy. They want Palestine to be Palestine, which overlaps with Bibi's stance, which is there shouldn't be a two-state solution. Whereas in the West Bank, the authority there, is it the Palestinian Authority?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They are of a mind to try and create a two-state solution.
Yeah, but still, it's never going to happen. I mean, you just have to be realistic about it. There's really, from the get-go, I don't know how far back you want to go, but we can go back to 1948 and the creation of the State of Israel. But obviously before that as well, the Zionist agenda was, this is our land, all of it.
Yeah.
Palestinians might be allowed to live there if they live peaceably and as second-class citizens. But if they don't, well, then they're going to go. And that's been the plan for a very long time.
So why wouldn't Trump just go? I
Because
know.
he's got a heart.
Ah.
And he doesn't want
But
to.
it
He
is-
doesn't want
do-
to start another
do you-
war.
Do you,
He doesn't want to.
do you find it striking? This is the first time I've ever heard him say no to Israel. So
Well, he had
clearly.
to. But he allowed them to kill a million.
We've heard private rumors that he's
Yeah.
not happy. He
Yeah.
called him an F-bomb.
He figures that
but-
he allowed them to kill 1 million Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah.
And that should be enough. So he's asking politely. Essentially, I mean, by saying no, he's kind of asking politely in a certain sense that, look, I'd like to kill 1 million of them. I think that's enough. Don't you think that's enough? Because we'd have to supply the weapons. We'd have to support you, so I'd rather not be put in that position again, Because it would effectively, if you were to start, that would be seen effectively as a continuation or even the start of a new war in the Middle East. And I just made peace in the Middle East. If you try and take the West Bank, you're basically starting another war under my watch with my weapons.
So what the Israelis just did was signal to Trump
Said,
by
fuck you, yeah.
humiliating Vance.
They're an independent country and they'll do what they want
We're
with
going to do it.
America's weapons. We're a totally sovereign, independent country, and you will continue to give us all the weapons that we need to do what we want. Or we'll blow up your cell phone. We'll blow up your Diet Coke can. You can never be sure. Is that Diet Coke you like, Trump? Be a pity if one of those exploded when you're drinking it, wouldn't it? Diet Coke everywhere.
Did you watch the press conference, Vance and Netanyahu? It was pretty awkward. Huh? A lot of quiet things were said out loud. Vance said, "We don't want a vassal state." And that's not what Israel is. We want an ally here.
Mm.
Netanyahu, nodding, added, "1 week they say that Israel controls the United States. A week later they say the United States controls Israel. This is hogwash. We have a partnership." So it's interesting that in trying to look solid, they're articulating the public discourse that they're madly trying to stamp out.
That's ridiculous. 1 week America controls Israel, the next week Israel controls America. That's not true. The truth is, if you look below the table here, I have my hands around JD Vance's balls and he has his hands around mine. It's a beautiful relationship. Every now and again we squeeze a bit tighter.
No homo.
No homo. And whoever caves first wins. It can change from week to week. Sometimes he's not feeling so good. I squeeze his balls. He gives me what I want. Other weeks I'm a bit feeling a bit tired. He squeezes mine. I submit and say, okay, I won't kill any more Palestinians this week. So it's a beautiful relationship.
The Washington Post cites an Israeli politician who remains anonymous. Netanyahu has turned Israel into a U.S. client state. What America says Israel does.
Which America?
True, not true.
Which America? Does that mean Trump? What Trump says Israel does? Well, then, Trump said, go in there and wipe out all those Palestinians. Give them hell. 70% women and children. He can't stop blubbing about 7,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers dying every week, according to him. But he doesn't shed a tear for upwards of 700,000 women and children killed by American bombs. So he did that. He told Israel to do that. He encouraged them. I don't think Trump has been talking about dealing definitively with the Palestinian problem for 80 years. It's quite a lot of Zionists have, though. So this, I'd say, on balance, this is their plan. And Trump's gone along with it because he hasn't a choice.
Who is they, though? And
They?
we are back again.
Who? Zionists.
Zionists, yeah. I mean, are they Christians, the Jews, the Americans, the Israelis?
There's Israelis for the most part. But there's a lot of them in America. In the halls of power in America, too. Christian Zionists. Whatever. Anyway, are we done? I'm sitting here for 2 hours. Sorting out the world's problems. It's all sorted now.
One last thing.
Just by explaining things, he sorts them all out.
Mm-hmm.
Solves them all.
Meanwhile, in France, the plot stiffens. Jean-Michel dit Brigitte Macron. So they're only publishing this now for some reason. But apparently this caused a shit show in the Elysee when it was discovered last year, September 24. BFM TV in France reports that when Brigitte Macron logged into her tax account, she saw that her name was registered as Jean-Michel dit Brigitte Macron, which means basically Jean-Michel as Brigitte Macron. Scroll down, they might have the exact French quote somewhere.
Jean-Michel Trognon, no. Yeah, keep going. Okay. Don't think so.
Anyhow,
Basically, D means otherwise known as.
Yeah.
Jean-Michel. Brigitte Macron, otherwise known as Jean-Michel.
Yeah.
Formerly known as Jean-Michel.
And so they've launched an investigation because somebody in the tax office did it.
So
that's what they're implying.
Someone produced the document.
Someone. They're suggesting someone altered her identity.
Okay.
On the official French tax account.
Right.
So when she logged in, she's like, "What the hell?"
Right. So either that happened, which is a problem in itself, because someone within the government is a conspiracy theorist.
Yes.
And there's maybe more than one, or they didn't, and that's a cover story because actually that's how it's actually recorded.
Yeah.
Because of old files, whatever, or just bureaucracy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Kept her original name.
France is just a shit show.
I saw something that there was not supposed to be possible for not her or him, for someone like not the individual to change that.
Yeah, that's what they've stressed in that BFM TV report, that this is really suspect because it's very hard to. Oh, in principle, I mean, Scotty will say, of course you can change it, but technically, only you can prove your identity and change that yourself. So it's Brigitte's doing. That's what they're implying. In other news from France, there was a break-in at the Louvre.
They got caught.
Suspects were arrested after a week yesterday. Two of them anyway. They were trying to flee the country. I think they were stopped at the airport. They still have no information on who they are.
Definitely Russians.
I love that Le Monde reports that investigators from the BRB made arrest yesterday, October 25th. What does BRB stand for?
Brigade.
Banditry Repression Brigade. It's so French.
Banditry repression. Repress that banditry.
In conjunction with the OCBC, the Central Office for the Fight Against Trafficking in Cultural Property. So apparently it's such a thing in France. There's an agency that's their
That
only
handles.
that's their remit. But it's no joke. €88 million worth of stolen crown jewels belonging to, well, I don't know who they belong to now, but they were once most famously the crown of the Empress Marie Louise, who was Napoleon's second wife, the Habsburg wife. I think that's the one they dropped on their little ladder escalator thingy. They dropped it on the street and it's damaged. If anyone saw the movie last year, it was in all the trailers. Joaquin Phoenix saying, "I found the crown of France just lying in the gutter."
And it was actually
That literally happened. Yeah.
happened last week.
Career. In other news from bonkers France, Sarko's gone to prison.
Yeah.
And he's getting solitary confinement, no less.
Yeah, to protect him.
Oh, it's for his sake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because he was once putting away people as the interior minister.
He was tough on crime.
Tough on crime, which helped his rise to power. Sarko l'Américain, they called him.
And now he's a
put
victim
France in NATO,
Yeah.
giving the deep state control over France's military intelligence, security apparatus, and his reward is to go to jail.
Yep.
What did he do really that was so... What do you think?
Campaign fund? Oh, really?
They say it's campaign fund fraud from 20
Gaddafi.
years ago.
From
I
Gaddafi.
don't buy that.
No, something else. He fell out with someone or, somebody. Because obviously, but he might appeal and he might get out, There might be a slap on the wrist. He will appeal, obviously. He is appealing. It's 5 years, but he may only spend a few months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wild
Good.
times.
Wild times. How do you know Adam and Eve weren't black?
The Bible says so. No, it doesn't actually. How do you know?
Have you ever tried taking a rib from a black man?
Oh, that's spicy.
Spicy ribs.
That's some spicy ribs.
Racist.
That's American humor, right?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
A black American would have a good laugh at that. You'd agree?
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was, I heard it from a black person actually. So anyway, that's some black American specific, African American joke.
Yes.
It's all about the diversity.
Yeah.
I'm recognizing.
Inclusion.
Yep. So we'll leave it there for this week, folks. We hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks for commenting and listening and watching and all that stuff. We'll be back next week with another show on whatever hilarious things have been going on between now and then. So until then, have a good week. See ya.
Thanks for watching. Bye all.
Can't stop the signal now.